What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're actually be taking a look at the new Tier Elements archetype, which was announced earlier in the week. It'll be in Power of the Elements, along with a lot of other stuff we've covered recently, but what's most intriguing about this is it's a dark aqua archetype, although there are a few water monsters, and it seems to be built around fusion summoning, but triggering that in unique ways. So if that's a little confusing to you, it'll obviously make more sense as we go through and take a look at the cards. I've only read a couple of these, so some of these are going to be genuine reactions, but I did have to take a look at some so that I could put together some possible support pieces and other cards to consider. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video, starting off with Tier Elements Meru. It is a dark level 2 aqua monster with the following effect. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck by placing materials mentioned on it from your hand, field, and or graveyard on the bottom of the deck in any order, including this card in your graveyard. So, just to sort of recap that a little bit, it gives you a mill on summon, which seems to play into the theme of all of these cards, where if they're sent to grave by card effect, you can fusion summon. So you can imagine how being able to mill and stack fusion effects of different monsters could be pretty powerful. And being able to shuffle from hand, field, and or grave into the deck to fusion summon with no real restrictions other than the fact that you need to use the card itself. So there are some generic ones we'll talk about, but also just keep an open mind to the fact that their fusion monsters are pretty solid too, and it's a neat mechanic, sort of a spin on the way we've typically seen fusion. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other cards here before we formulate an opinion. Tier Elements hauphinus, I might have mispronounced that terribly. It's a dark level 3 aqua. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, again triggering that mill. If this card is sent to graveyard by card effect, you can fusion summon a fusion monster, placing monsters from hand, field, and or grave, including this card on the bottom of the deck. So, all of them are going to have that effect when they're sent to grave. You can perform a fusion summon, so to save time and breath, I won't read that every single time, but it is built into all of the mainline monsters. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is if a monster on your opponent's field activates an effect, you special this, and then you get the mill. It's kind of weak because having to rely on the opponent to special summon in order to, or to use a monster effect in order to be able to special summon this is definitely a bit of a drawback, but it does give you another name that can proc fusion summons, and overall is still a half-decent extender, considering the opponent is likely going to use some monster effects throughout your turn. I just don't love it in comparison to the first one, which just seems to be a lot more solid. Tier Element Shalin. During your main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send one monster from your hand to the graveyard. Then, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Then it has that regular effect that all the rest of them have. So, this one is the best one by far. I've seen this one already, and I kind of read it over. Level 4 Dark Aqua, so you special it from your hand, that's just all you have to do, and then you send a monster from hand to grave. So that sending is a card effect, which means it'll trigger anything that activates off card effects, things like Shadal, things like other tier elements. There's a billion cards that trigger off of card effects, so it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on, because in general, while that drawback is still a drawback because you're minusing yourself, in a lot of cases it does help to fuel your other effects. So just be a bit more optimistic, because this deck is going to be very graveyard reliant, and playing cards that trigger when sent to grave look like they'll be a solid option. So Shalin is by far the best. That level 4 ability to special summon itself and act as an extender. There are no real restrictions on it either. It's not like you're locked into fusions or anything like that. So, it's just an overall decent card to consider. And the last mainline monster is Tier Elements Reinoheart, and this is a level 4 water monster, warrior type, which is not aqua, obviously, but it is searchable by Rhoda, so there's that. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send one Tier Elements monster from your deck to the graveyard, except this card. If this card is sent to the grave by card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do, send one Tier Elements card from your hand to the graveyard. Banish this card when it leaves the field. So, it's self-reviving, meaning if you discard it, say, with the card we just discussed here, you can then special summon it back. It also has the ability to help you discard a card to further your card effect activations for fusion summoning. So there's a lot going on there, which is neat. These two are much stronger than the other two, but I definitely could see an argument for playing all 4, especially because you're just limited in the number of names that you have. And of course, because these two are also fusion triggers, whereas, of course, Reinoheart is not. But it looks like there's a solid foundation there, especially because of the synergy they're going to have with so many other archetypes and cards. Taking a look at the fusions, though, Tier Elements Kidcarlos is a level 5 Dark Aqua fusion monster, one Tier Elements monster, and one Aqua monster. If this card is special summoned, you can take one Tier Elements card from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. You can target one monster you control, special summon one Tier Elements monster from your hand or grave, and if you do, send that targeted monster to the grave. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So, when it's summoned, you get to search a Tier Elements card. It is an instant fusion target, which is kind of neat. Obviously, instant fusion being at 1 means it's less likely to happen, but you can summon this off instant fusion and get a search, and then you're able to sack this off to, revive a different one because it can target itself. So there is that to consider. It does have really good synergy with instant fusion for the deck. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you can mill. Again, it's an optional mill, but it seems like in this deck, milling is going to be really helpful, especially because of so many cards you can actually put back. And it's definitely really solid. So, a lot of positive things to look forward to. Next up, Tier Elements Collido is a level 9 Dark Fiend fusion monster. That's a mouthful. Tier Elements Reinoheart plus 2 Aqua monsters. Cannot be used as fusion material if this card is special summoned or an Aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by card effect. While this card is on the field, you can target one card your opponent controls, shuffle it into the deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special it, and if you do, send a Tier Elements card from your deck to the graveyard. Mouthful again. Okay, so if it's special summoned or an Aqua monster is sent to grave by card effect, you can target a card your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck. That's really powerful. Obviously, spinning removal that triggers on its own summon, but also by using any of your, Aqua monster effects to send stuff means this is going to be consistently live, though it is a hard once per turn, and kind of for obvious reasons. And then when it is sent to the grave, you special it back, which would then trigger its effect. And you can send a Tier Elements card. So this is a pretty good card, especially because, it can keep coming back, and when it does, it's problematic. So the opponent's going to have to exhaust a lot of resources to get over it, which in most cases is kind of, good for a boss monster. So it's not super hard to summon, especially because the other ones set up mills. It's definitely good. It can't be used as fusion material, means you can't cycle it back in from the graveyard if you're fusion summoning again with some of the other monsters, but that's okay, and it's sort of a necessary restriction in my opinion. Perlano, the Primal Parallel Ruined Realm. When this card is activated, you can add one Tier Elements monster or one Visa Starfrost from your deck to your hand. Fusion monsters and Tier Elements monsters you control gain 500 attack. If Tier Elements monster is returned from your field and or graveyard to the deck and or extra deck, you can target one card on the field, destroy it. You can only use this effect once per turn. So, basically, if you perform a fusion summon with one of your monsters that's established, shuffling cards back into the deck, this will trigger and you can destroy a card on the field. Just to put it in perspective, if you were to make Collido Heart using one of your other Tier Elements monsters, you're getting to spin a card on the field and pop one off of this, which is a really, really solid 2-for-1 punch that doesn't require you to use extra card resources. This also searches because it's a field spell in 2022, so just other food for thought. This is a really powerful piece of support that goes well with these cards, especially Collido Heart, and this is kind of where you're getting your destruction coming in and a powerful recurrable boss. Tier Elements Meta Noise. If you control a Tier Elements monster or Visa Starfrost, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, change it to face-down defense position, then send one Tier Elements monster from your deck to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target a Tier Elements monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use one effect of this card per turn. So, really powerful here in terms of Perlano, in terms of Tier Elements Collido Heart. Being able to synergize with these cards is definitely something to look at. Tier Element Solix is a continuous trap that says if you control a Tier Elements monster, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, then send one monster you control to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add one Tier Elements monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. So, all the traps, when they are sent to grave by card effect, you get to add one back, which means it synergizes well with the ones that force you to discard its cost, and this provides disruption for the opponent, allowing you to negate their card effects. Tier Elements Crime is a counter trap. When a spell trap or monster effect is activated while you control a Tier Elements monster or Visa Starfrost, negate the activation, and if you do, shuffle that card into the deck, then send one monster from your hand to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target a banished Tier Elements monster, add it back to your hand. So you can cycle with all of the traps. All of the traps, when they're sent to graveyard by card effect, do allow you to recur resources from grave, which is a really powerful thing to have, and honestly, one of the best, kind of elements, no pun intended here, of what we're looking at with these cards. And so that brings us back to Tier Elements Meru, and one of the things I wanted to talk about is in terms of support that go along with them. Swap Frog is a really good card, especially because it can proc Meru, but it's also an Aqua monster in and of itself. So you can discard a water monster to special it, summon Swap Frog, and then mill Meru, and you can automatically perform a fusion summon 1 of the 3 material monster just off of that one summon, as long as you have another card in hand. So that's a really cool interaction that you have. King of the Swamp is another one to consider. It is an aqua. You can discard it to search polymerization, and it's a fusion substitute, which means you can use things such as King of the Swamp to make your other tier element monsters because it's a fusion substitute, and it's an aqua that generates resources, so it's really good in multiple facets. And honestly, because of the fact that you can get the 1 polymerization, it doesn't even hurt to play it just as an additional option to go into something, send some integrate by card effect, and then shuffle things back in. True King Barastos the Fathomer, another decent water support card that does, you can pop those monsters in hand or field, that will count as sending them to grave, and then you can banish spells and traps your opponent controls. So it's another neat piece of support. It is Worm, it's not Aqua, so there is that drawback, but another solid one to consider. Guardian Chimera even is one you can make with this, and that's a card that's got a ton of popularity right now. You must use a monster from hand or field, with at least 1 monster from each, and the problem with Guardian Chimera, of course, is that you're really going to have to be playing other fusion support to bring it out, just because you initially using the tier element monster effects have to use a monster from grave, which Guardian Chimera cannot be. And of course, Armageddon Knight is another one that's decent to consider, especially because some of the tier elements monsters are dark, and you can summon Armageddon Knight to send one, which would then allow you to start proccing off their effects and perform fusion summons. So it's really interesting with that dark water synergy they have going on, and these are just a few cards I was thinking about that'd be really good. I think Swamp Frog is easily the best piece of interaction, but King of the Swamp is definitely really good too. And overall, I think the archetype has a ton of potential. So let me know what you guys think about this archetype. Like the video if you did enjoy it, and please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. Leave a comment down below. I like to interact, and it does help the video to get seen more as well. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.